This is the newest addition to the Burrfection family. It's a knife completely designed by me. For those who don't care to listen to the backstory of this knife and how it got designed, I'll post a link in the video description to where you can go and read up more on this knife. For everyone else who wants to hear more about this knife and how it got designed, we're going to talk about it. And yes, you're not seeing things. This is my thumb covered in a band-aid that says Little Princess on it. So July of 2019, or the end of June of 2019, I went to Japan and I was there for about 2 weeks. And so during that time, I got to meet Sakai Takayuki, Tojiro, and a host of other knife makers. And so during one of my visits with Tojiro, we sat down, we talked about a knife that I wanted to design. And so I proposed my plan of wanting to design a knife with Tojiro. And for those who don't know my history with Tojiro, Tojiro was one of the very first, I think it was like the second or third knife that I bought for Ricky Tran before Burrfection. So back in my old channel called Ricky Tran. And for those who are still curious, I'll leave a link to it. There are no knife videos on that channel anymore. It's just a few vlogs. I will be reviving that channel for other purposes other than knives. On that channel, I first bought a Matsumoto VG10, a Matsumoto KS, and I started doing all of my tutorials and sharpening videos with the Tojiro DP. At the time, only cost like $47 or so. And now it's a $80 knife, $85 knife. But back then, I bought 3 Tojiro DPs, and it was the knife that everyone wanted to buy when you were first getting into Japanese knives. I still recommend that knife frequently for those who are getting into Japanese knives. This knife doesn't share anything with the Tojiro DP, but I wanted to share with you why I have such affinity for Tojiro. During that visit in Japan last year, the Ricky knife was born. The original design was all done by me, and Tojiro got the same design specs that Sakai Takayuki did, but the delays of VG10 caused this knife to be substantially different, and I'll tell you what happened. Sakai Takayuki made that knife first. They were able to get the steel and the manufacturing done about 6 months after the initial design process. Through that time, what happened with Tojiro was the VG10 core steel we were looking to order the knife with was not available. The period that I'm referring to is pre-COVID-19. This is from June of 2019 through December. What was happening was the capacity of the steel manufacturers was being maxed out for construction for the Olympics, buildings, signage, roadways, all those sort of things that the city of Tokyo needed for the final construction of the Olympics. I would be in constant communication with Tojiro during this time, and I would get communications like, hey, steel is being delayed. We can't get anything for at least 6 months to maybe even a year. During that delay time, we kept on working. It wasn't so much like, hey, let's just stop here and wait for the steel. They would send me a sample. I would use it, and I would say, hey, you know what? Let's just change the sample a little bit. I didn't want it to be a complete replica of the original design. Since we already have that, I didn't want to make it just another VG10 stainless steel version of the original design. And so we changed a lot of things during that 6-month period. And so we went through about 3 to 4 different design phases and redesigns of the original. And so by January of 2020, the final design was more or less done. I was really happy with the overall design, and Tojiro also said, hey, you know what? We think we can get the knife delivered by June, July of 2020. I said, okay, great. Let's finalize the design and roll with it. And then around April, May of 2020, I received a package in the mail, and it was the final production sample of the knife. And it had all of the finishings that I required. It had all of the extra polishing on the spine and the choil that I asked for. It was a rounded choil versus more squared, perpendicular choil. The blade thickness was done the right way. Everything was like specced out the way I intended. And so they said, you know what? We can have your knives delivered to you in about 6 to 8 weeks. I said, great, do it, So for those who are curious, let's talk about why this knife is different from the original design. It's quite different. You put it next to the blue number 2. This is the blue number 2 by Sakai Takayuki is the original design. Everything on this knife was basically specced out by me. This was how I wanted my knives to be designed. Thanks to all the great feedback from you guys, the customers, I was able to redefine the knife a little bit and basically It's a whole new design. This knife here, side by side, initially they do look very similar, but they are completely different knives. When I designed the original knife, I wanted to be a really aggressive Sabatier, French Sabatier profile. The reason I designed the knives with a Sabatier profile is due to my cutting techniques. The Sabatier profile tends to fit me the best. First off, blade height is 49 millimeters, the spine is 2.5 millimeters, and the overall length of the blade is 240 millimeters. The core seal is VG10 with a 6061 Rockwell rating and with the stainless steel Damascus cladding. The knife weighs in at about 160 grams and it's ultra light. It's about 15 grams heavier with the same handle as the Sakai Takayuki version, the blue number 2. Now 15 grams doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it makes a significant difference when it comes to a knife. Here's what I did differently. So blue number 2 is Sakai Takayuki and VG10 is Tojiro. Okay, now the cutting profile of the blue number 2 is a bit more aggressive relative to the VG10. So from the heel of the knife up to about the middle section of the knife, it's relatively flat. Then you have a very gentle belly leading to a really thin tip. The VG10 on the other hand has a really gentle radius at the cutting edge. So there is virtually no flat spots anywhere on the cutting edge. We also increased the spine thickness from 2.2 millimeters to about 2.5 millimeters. So the knife is a bit more substantial that way. Now from where you're sitting, you really cannot see this, but if you were to measure the height of the blades between each other, at any given point, the VG10 will be 1 to 3 millimeters taller than the blue number 2. And I took a very specific point of 3 inches behind the tip. So if you measure from the tip 3 inches back, you kind of hit where the belly would be. And the VG10 is actually about 3 millimeters taller at that same profile than the blue number 2. And with every design update of the knife, I made the knife just a millimeter thicker at the top 1/3. And it got to the point where I felt the knife was a very neutral performing knife with a Sabatier profile. It wasn't so aggressive like the original design, and it wasn't too blade heavy at the front end where it just made you more fatigued in long-term use. And when designing a knife, you have to kind of keep in mind, if the knife is too heavy up front, it's going to create a lot of fatigue. If the knife is too heavy in the back, you don't have a lot of cut power in the front. And so to design a knife that has the most neutral feeling in terms of overall cutting performance at the front and the back of the knife was very important to me. I know all of that sounds really minor and maybe overall too technical, but in terms of actual usage, the VG10 is going to suit a lot more people than the blue number 2. The Sakai Takayuki knife, blue number 2, it's much more aggressive, and those who consider themselves more purists will enjoy that knife more. And for everybody else, home and professional chefs in the kitchen will more or less enjoy, I think, the VG10's profile a bit more. It's more neutral, it's easier to manage, and it's slightly more heavy. So even though it's slightly more heavy, it's still only 160 grams. So keep that in mind. It is still considered an ultra light knife. And the handle options, we have a teak, wenge, and ebony. Teak I love because it has got a lot of oils in it. You don't have to do a whole lot in terms of maintaining it. It's just a really good material for making knife handles out of. And then wenge, two-tone black and brown, really beautiful handle, fairly stable and also pretty dense as well. And so that's a handle that I wanted to use for this version of the knives. Ebony is my favorite octagonal handle material. It is dense, it's virtually watertight, and it doesn't require any sort of maintenance when you get it. You can oil it once in a while if you really want to. So yeah, that is my story with the VG10 made by Tojiro. As of today, it has been exactly a year since I've come back from Japan. So this knife literally took a year to actually get here. so at the posting of this video, the knives are actually en route and they will be ready to ship in about a week. And so I cannot wait to hear what you guys think of them. And I am just so excited to keep designing knives. And I cannot believe I am designing knives. So crazy. And I thank you for all of your support. I thank you for all of your feedback and comments on my very first knife launch. In a really strange twist of events, because the Olympics were canceled due to COVID-19, I was able to get these knives here. So it's a really strange thought, but yeah, it's true. So even though the launch of this knife is 7 to 8 months later than the original intended date, it actually was a good thing because it allowed me 6 months of designing and redesigning of the original design to get it to where it is today based on your feedback. So that's actually a really good thing for me to learn from. I've got to say, one of the reasons why I love designing these knives with these companies is that I get to work with really talented bladesmiths. And working with Sakata Takayuki's bladesmiths and working with Tojiro bladesmith, they work very differently, but seeing how they work, seeing how to design knives, getting their input, giving them my opinions and getting feedback from them is so valuable. Sitting down with a bladesmith who makes hundreds of knives a week, a month, is so amazing. The passion that bladesmiths have is like no other to me. And that's partly why I love Japanese knives so much, is being able to work with not only talented knife makers, but really passionate people about cutlery. And it's just such an amazing process. And I have you guys to thank for it. And so thank you. Thank you. But before I go, I just want to say thank you to you who are watching. Thank you to every one of my Patreon supporters. Thank you to all of my subscribers here on YouTube. You guys have made this entire dream possible. From my very first knife with Sakata Takayuki to this knife, to the success of my e-store, you guys have made all of it possible. So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And feel free to leave your comments and questions in the comment section. I am a bit more active these days with YouTube comments, and I'm doing my best to read everything. I do read everything, but I may not be able to reply to everything. But I'm doing a lot more better at that right now. So keep those comments coming, keep that feedback coming. I want to make the best knife possible, and without your help, that would not be possible. So thank you for all of that. All right, guys. Well, that'll be for today's video. I'll catch you in the next one.